Hey, good people. The state of Victoria has racked up $31.5 billion worth of debt over the past 4-year COVID period. And for some reason, it's the property investors that have to pay for it. 70% of property investors are your mum and dad who bought their second home and rented out their first one. Why should they have to pay for COVID? They didn't receive any special handout. During a housing crisis, wouldn't we want more investment in housing? If you tax housing, you get less houses. That's why we tax cigarettes and alcohol so harshly, because we want people to smoke and drink less. It's the exact same economic principle. In fact, it's an economic law. Whatever you tax, you will get less of. After a subscriber sent me this news article, I decided to go to the source and read the Victorian State's COVID debt repayment plan, and on page 1, we can see their guiding principle. You would think, if I spent a bunch of money on the credit card, then I should have to pay it back. But it's apparently not about who is responsible for the debt, it's about who has the ability to pay for it. If we scroll down to page 4, we can see the government spent $21 billion on the economy, $16 billion on health, and $2.6 billion on household support. When you add all that up, it totals $40.1 billion. And after the federal government kicked in $8.7 billion to help pay for all of the COVID spending, the Victorian government is left with $31.5 billion of debt. Just to put that into perspective, for $40.1 billion, we could have bought the entire economic output of Bahrain, Latvia, Estonia, or Iceland. But instead, we got a housing crisis and mass migration out of the state. Seriously, for the $16 billion in health, Victoria didn't get one new hospital. But what's done is done. We've got to pay off this debt, so let's take a look at the numbers. Down on page 19, there is a breakdown of how the debt is going to be paid for. And already I can spot the first problem. It says here that the Vic government is going to save $2.1 billion over 4 years by reductions in consultancy and other financial waste. The problem is, reducing spending doesn't create revenue. You can reduce your outgoings to absolute zero, but only money coming in can pay off the debt. If I've got a debt of $100 and I stop eating for a week and I sleep in a tent, at the end of the week, I will still owe $100. I have to go and get money in order to pay off that debt. This is intentionally diluted. They've got people working for them that can tell them that's not how finance works. Point 2 is that $3.9 billion will be raised over 4 years by taxing any company that pays out more than $10 million a year in wages. That's $500,000 that a company has to find and give away if it pays too much money to employees. If we all agree that big businesses are greedy, profit-seeking entities, then wouldn't the best thing for them to do would be to lower the payroll by laying off people or reducing wages? $500,000 is a lot of money, and it might be cheaper to just lay off staff and reduce your output than to pay $500,000 in tax. Like we said before, anything you tax, you will get less of. If you tax the payroll, we will get less pay. This is what's known as an unintended consequence. The third way in which the Victorian government plans to revenue raise is to lower the tax-free threshold for investment properties. It's actually a land tax. A land tax is where the government estimates the value of your land and then you pay a percentage of that estimated figure as a tax to the government. And it's just the land, not the buildings on top of it. They expect this to raise $4.7 billion over 4 years. This tax will not apply to the family home, which is why they are spruiking it as a tax on property investors. Why property investors are morally obliged to pay for the government's COVID debt, I don't know. But you can expect the price of rentals to increase as property investors pass this cost on to the tenant. The sad thing is that young renters will probably cheer on the government for taxing greedy market moguls while simultaneously complaining about the increasing cost of rent, not realizing that they're cheering for their own destruction. When you add all these figures up, it equals $10.7 billion over 4 years or $2.6 billion over 1 year. Now, these taxes are only meant to exist for 10 years, and the debt is $31.5 billion. So if we do the numbers, 10 years will only equal $26.7 billion. We will have to run these taxes for just under 12 years in order to cover the $31.5 billion. And that's ignoring the savings aren't revenue issue, ignoring the interest on the debt, ignoring the government's typically rosy predictions on revenue, and assuming that people won't change their actions based on these new rules. You may not know this, but when economists in a budget office are told to make predictions, they're told to assume that people will behave the same before and after the rules change. But it's not their fault. It's called the ceteris paribus principle. But we know that's not how people operate. People will react to the new rules and change their behaviors. So what can you do about all of this? Well, for one, don't vote for these people. When someone tells you that they're going to give you free money, it's bullshit. The government can't give you something that it didn't first take from someone else. And guess what? You're someone else. When a politician tells you that it's temporary, just remember, they're gone in 4 years, and the next guy didn't make that promise. Next, send an email to your local MP. You might think that this is a pointless exercise, but if a politician receives 10 emails, they know that there are 10,000 more people out there that care, but just don't have the time to email them. The misinformation bill just got postponed until June, due to public pushback. That happened because a bunch of people wrote emails about it. You can make a difference. Remember, you were born free. If you enjoyed that, please share it and consider subscribing. It means a lot to me. I'd like to say thank you to the person who sent that news article to me and to this person's insightful and helpful criticisms. With people like this giving useful feedback, I can only get better. Peace.